What's up guys, it's Chris Majestic, and today we're checking out the Epson QB1000. So how does the QB1000 stack up against the current competition? Well, today we're gonna find out. So a couple years ago, I reviewed the Epson LS11000, which I've used in my home theater for the past couple years. Well, since the release of the LS11000 and 12000 projectors, Epson has added a slew of projectors to what they're calling their Pro Cinema line, which are aimed at the premium residential market. These projectors range from around $2,000 to over $30,000, and the QB1000 sits somewhat in the middle. So when it comes to design, the QB1000 shares a very similar design to Epson's previous home theater projectors like the 5050UB, 4050, and LS12000. It is slightly larger than those though, being just over 25 inches wide, almost 18 inches deep, and nearly 11 inches tall. The front has vents on the sides, a 15-element motorized glass lens in the center, which has a motorized lens cover, as well as an infrared sensor for the remote. The top of the unit has a few indicator lights. On the left side, you'll find power and source buttons along with more vents for ventilation. And the back of the unit has a removable cover, which gives it a clean look when installed in your home theater. And removing that cover reveals the ports as well as a few buttons. And when it comes to ports, you get a USB Type A port, a USB service port, a 12-volt trigger, an Ethernet port which can be used for external control, which I'll talk about later, another USB port which is good for powering an active HDMI cable. It has two HDMI 2.1 ports with eARC support, an RS-232 port which can be used for external control, and the power jack can be found near the bottom. And when it comes to specs, the QB1000 brings quite a bit to the table. It uses Epson's new QZX picture processor to produce a 4K image. It's capable of putting out 3300 ISO lumens, with Epson claiming a 5,000,000:1 dynamic contrast ratio. It has a motorized zoom, electronic focus, both vertical and horizontal lens shift, and lens memory. It has an impressive throw range, allowing it to throw a 100-inch image from around 10 feet all the way to about 20 feet. And it's also compatible with anamorphic lenses for those who need it. It supports HDR10, HDR10 Plus, and HLG, and it has a native 120 Hz refresh rate with low input lag, which is great for gaming. And if you've ever watched any of my previous Epson reviews, you'll know that Epson projectors are among the best home theater projectors when it comes to installation flexibility. With a 96% vertical lens shift, a 47% horizontal lens shift, wide zoom range, and electronic focus, you can very easily get the image aligned with any screen in any room. Even if the projector is off center from the screen, the horizontal lens shift allows you to shift the image to the left or right without losing image quality. And the vertical lens shift allows you to sit the projector right side up on a shelf in the back of the room if you don't want to mount it upside down on the ceiling. And if you connect the projector to your home network using the Ethernet port, you get access to a cool web interface which allows you to directly control all of the projector settings right from a web browser, negating the need for the remote, which is really awesome. And speaking of the remote, the Epson remote works great. Yes, it is a bit big and bulky, but it's fully backlit and has all of the buttons that are needed. And with HDMI control or HDMI CEC enabled, it even allows you to control your streamer or Blu-ray player. So unlike many of the projectors I've been reviewing lately, the QB1000 doesn't have a smart TV OS, but it does have a very extensive menu system. By default, the projector's laser output setting is set to 85%, which is a good balance between high brightness and quieter operation. It has 4 color modes, which are dynamic, vivid, cinema, and natural mode. Epson has always done a great job with out-of-box color accuracy and image quality, and the QB1000 is no exception. Every picture mode produces a great image, although cinema and natural modes are the best in a darkroom environment. And speaking of darkroom, how bright is the Epson QB1000? Well, with Epson recently suing several projector manufacturers over the past 2 years for lying about brightness, you better believe Epson is gonna perform as they say, and it does. In dynamic mode with full laser brightness, I measured the brightness and got almost exactly 3300 ANSI lumens, which is right on par with Epson's claims. Now, of course, its brightest mode isn't the most color accurate mode, so I also measured it in cinema mode and got around 2200 ANSI lumens, which is still more than bright enough for my 135-inch screen. And when it comes to sharpness, Epson's new VRX cinema lens does a great job producing a sharp image with great focus uniformity. And even though it is sharper than Epson's older projectors like the 5050UB, I found that it's not quite as sharp as the more recent DLP projectors. I found that increasing the fine detail setting did help a bit with the sharpness, but unless you're really pixel peeping like I do in these reviews, you're probably not gonna notice. When it comes to color accuracy, Epson doesn't doesn't mention the QB1000's color coverage, but I took the liberty of taking my own measurements, and I found that it covered well over 100% of Rec. 709 and around 90% of DCI P3. Okay, so now on to the thing you really came here for, which is image quality. Well, just as I expected, the Epson QB1000 did not disappoint when it came to producing a bright, vivid, and color-accurate image. Unlike DLP projectors, 3LCD have equal color and white brightness, so the colors pop even brighter than the rated lumen output would suggest. The best way to describe it is that the image just looks natural, especially in the cinema and natural modes. And if you do need to install it in a room with some ambient light, you can put it in dynamic mode and cut through quite a bit of ambient light. This makes the QB1000 great for mixed usage if you want to use it somewhere like a living room or recreational room. So for the most part, when you see a B in the name of an Epson projector, it often indicates that it can produce good black levels, and that is definitely the case with the QB1000. Now, Epson doesn't state the native contrast of the QB1000, and my room isn't quite perfect for measuring contrast, but when measuring the native contrast in cinema mode, I got a native contrast over 6,000 to 1 with the projector at its longest throw range, which is pretty good. Now, Epson claims a 5 million to 1 dynamic contrast, but once you incorporate some light into the image, the black floor raises quite a bit, which explains the 6,000 to 1 native contrast. And the perceived contrast from this projector is fantastic. The dynamic laser dimming mixed with the dynamic contrast setting produce good black levels and contrast that easily outperform the LS12000, even though it's not competing with projectors with super dark black levels. With HDR, it produced a natural looking image with great skin tones, highlights, and shadow detail. I personally prefer watching HDR content in natural mode, which produced the most color accurate image, and I found that the dynamic tone mapping did a fantastic job producing a great balance between highlights, shadow detail, and overall brightness. The dynamic tone mapping does reduce the brightness a good bit, but I still found that it was more than bright enough for my 135-inch screen. Overall, the QB1000 produced a very enjoyable image with great contrast, great color accuracy, and good black levels. So earlier I mentioned that the QB1000 has a native 120Hz refresh rate. This is pretty rare with most home theater projectors and makes it a great option for gaming. When measuring input lag, I got about 19 milliseconds with 4K at 60Hz and around 28 milliseconds with 1080p at 120Hz. Now, I'm not sure why it was higher with 1080 at 120, but 19 milliseconds at 60Hz is a pretty good number for avid gamers. The capability of 120 frames per second, high brightness, good contrast, and low input lag make it a great option for gaming. Alright, so we talked a lot about brightness in this review, so how was the fan noise from the QB1000? Well, with the projector at its default 85% laser brightness in cinema mode, I measured about 41 decibels, and with the laser at 100%, it jumped up to about 43 decibels. So overall, with its default settings, it's fairly quiet, and even in its brightest mode, you can hear it from several feet away, but it's not quite loud enough to cause a distraction. Alright, so now it's time for everybody's favorite part of the video where I talk about the things I don't like. The first issue I have is the price. With the retail price of $8,000, the Epson QB1000 has priced itself out of the hands of most people. At $8,000, you have to consider SXRD projectors from Sony or JVC, which are sharper, have better black levels, and are far more popular in high-end home theaters. Now, with that being said, they're not nearly as bright as the QB1000, so if you're not always using it in a completely dark room, it can be a better alternative. And my next concern is related to the sharpness. I found that the QB1000 is significantly sharper than the older 3LCD projectors like the 5050UB, but it's not quite as sharp as a higher end DLP projector. To help with this, I increased the fine detail setting under the image enhancement menu to get a bit more sharpness, even though it adds a bit of a halo to objects if you push it too far. Overall, this setting does help, but considering that the QB1000 probably produces the softest image compared to any other projector remotely close to $8,000, it is definitely something to consider. And my last concern is a pretty minor one, and that's that it doesn't have Dolby Vision support. Now, I've been waiting quite some time for Epson to support Dolby Vision just to see how they would implement it with their tone mapping algorithm, but unfortunately none of their projectors support it. Now, to be fair, no projector can really show the true capabilities of Dolby Vision in my opinion, since it really takes the contrast and peak brightness capabilities of a TV to really show it off, but it does offer a few benefits over HDR10 and HDR10+, so I would like to see it even though it's not really really a big deal. But in spite of the few things I don't like, I still think the QB1000 is a fantastic projector. It's one of the brightest long throw projectors I've ever reviewed from Epson, making it a great option for rooms with some ambient light. And it somehow still produces great contrast and black levels in spite of it being so bright, and it works great for gaming considering its 120Hz refresh rate and low input lag. Now, it's definitely not cheap and doesn't produce the same sharpness, contrast, and black levels as high-end XXRD projectors, but it's much brighter and offers a bit more flexibility. So if you're looking for a projector that produces a great looking image and has a ton of flexibility, and you've got deep pockets, then the Epson QB1000 might be the projector for you. But that's gonna pretty much do it for this video, guys. Hopefully you found it helpful. If you did, go ahead and make sure you mash that like button for me. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon so you don't miss out on any new videos. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next video.